And then you've got a bunch of experience in building these types of relationships as well, because you've done a bunch of this sort of like large mega cloud partner navigation on top of this. How much of the Salesforce experience you're describing is reflective of what you saw across other businesses?
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest part about that is when somebody approaches a Salesforce or a HubSpot or a Microsoft or anybody, it's on the surface, it looks like your company partnering with Salesforce. And yeah, that's true. But you have to, in order to really move the needle, it needs to be people making relationships with people. And then really compounding on that and nurturing those relationships. And then again, we already kind of talked about this, but these relationships are going to snowball. They're going to introduce you to other people who would find value in your product. They're going to introduce you to your boss. And don't be afraid to ask for that referral too, of like, hey, AE, you think this is a great opportunity. Who else on your team? Can I meet your boss? Can we do a team enablement? Like, shoot for the fences. What are they going to do? Say no. And then guess what? There is 9,999 other sellers within the Salesforce ecosystem you can go talk to.
Go knock on their doors. Is there like a critical mass then? It sounds like you've had a bunch of success. And the reason I asked the question is, if I'm listening to you say this, right? If I'm an audience member listening to this, I'm trying to figure out how to do this myself. That's what I'm picturing, right? If I'm enjoying this episode, it's because I too am trying to tap into Salesforce or Microsoft, HubSpot, whoever it is at the kind of biggest level, right? The biggest playing field. Are there maybe friction points you've experienced or perhaps, bumps and bruises you want to share around things to be conscious of early, like starting from, to your point, relationship development, but what other components should I take into account as I try and approach one of these very large organizations, that could smush me and really navigate what can be, frankly, a complex organizational structure and a lot of things you're describing in terms of the playbook to go be successful?
Yeah, for sure. And I think the obvious cliche answer is add value, but to double click on that, it's like, have your ask, be very articulate and clear with it, but then also make it really personalized to this person. So you have to think about in the Salesforce ecosystem, there are 5,000 ISV partners and they're all vying for these AE's attention. So how are you going to really drive value for this AE? And it's going to look different for everybody. Like for instance, if we're talking big enterprise AEs, the rev share, average contract value that I can provide back to them is nothing is in terms of their quota. So I got to shift. What is my actual value prop to them? Is it a better experience for the customer? Is it stickier? So it's not one size fits all. Neither are relationships. So really just like be curious, be human, and show up to the table. I think if you can put on your BD hat, your business development hat, and just go be curious, go be a human, ask the right questions, and don't be like a one size fit all, because it's just not going to work.
Yeah, it reminds me of, I used to be responsible for training at one point at HubSpot. And during that time, I had a mentor that said to me, you can teach them to actively listen. And I always kind of like would giggle and be like, yeah, sure. Everyone says that in sales. You need to actively listen. We used to do this like kind of sing-songy way of saying actively listening is the act of listening with the intent to understand. And what you're describing is the, very clear intent of working with each of these individuals to connect the context for what they care about, how they invest in their customers, how they win, hit their number and grow, to the value you deliver to both that customer and the EE, and trying to drive, the big picture. And I think it sounds like from that, you get this ability to very clearly attribute your impact, not insignificantly, right, on the individual, potentially the team, and then certainly on the partnership overall. And then how are you reporting in some sort of like a data sheet, or are you using a platform to go back and say to Salesforce, like, I have to imagine there's like an ISV manager, a partner manager that's supporting this as well, and they're KPI'd too. So I'm thinking about just the dimensionality of this. Does your team once a quarter sit down and look at these different input metrics and synthesize into something, maybe a presentation or whatever, that you give back to Salesforce to say like, hey, pay attention, we are doing these valuable things? Or am I assuming?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
No, I mean, yeah, absolutely. I think that's the other part about partnerships that is often underlooked, is being very vocal.
Yeah. Get loud. Yep.
Yeah. So that can be uncomfortable for people. But like if you're doing all the hard work and it's working, then you have to talk about it. Otherwise, it goes unnoticed. So we definitely share this back to Salesforce. And I think the other thing I want to go back to what you just said is I started this way. When I took over the Salesforce partnership, I was like, okay, just go get them.
Yeah.
They're so big. Go. Just go get them.
Yeah.
And that can be one strategy, but in my experience, it falls flat because if you can build those individual relationships, they're going to point to pockets of influence within any ecosystem. And those are naturally going to grow for you. And then that's how you're going to scale. So it starts small to scale big, I think is something that's not super intuitive to people. But that's what we've been reporting back to Salesforce too, of like, okay, we're having a lot of luck in the HLS industry with these teams. What are they doing to be super partner friendly or bring us into deals that we can now replicate over, say, whatever, manufacturing, financial services, et cetera. And we're helping them be more partner friendly and, streamline their processes as well. So the value is not just ACV, it's how can we build a partner-friendly ecosystem where everybody wins.
Yeah, you're teaching the teacher, which I think is just fascinating in general, and the ability to go back and say, this is clearly what's transpiring and how we can scale it across. Are you getting then a response of, sweet, let's keep doing that? And I'm curious because I wonder if that's what's impacting the scalability and helping you to go and expand other, verticals and markets and whatnot as well.
No doubt.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And again, it comes with being loud. I mean, I've heard, evangelism is a huge part of partnerships. And so you just have to tell everybody what you're working on and how it's working, and that will trickle. And people want to be involved. So,
and you think, it sounds like this is true. I'm careful not to make assumptions in the show, but it sounds like you are effectively going to market faster. Your customers are happier overall. I have to expect that anecdotally you can point to clear data that shows, ACV really certainly, but also faster sales cycle and stickier customer and all the core metrics that the partner themselves cares about, which you then in return have to be loud about.
Absolutely.
Yep. Cool.
And going back to our very first question here of like aligning with goals, I think that's a double-edged sword, two-sided coin.
Yeah, sure.
What are my goals? What are my company goals? And am I making sure that us as a partner team are pointing to those and aligning to those? But then also, you've mentioned it, what is my partner's goals? And how am I on a weekly, quarterly, daily basis connecting with them and making sure I'm driving towards those too? Because again, this is a two-way street.
That's a great springboard. It was going to be my final question to you in terms of how much do you care about. I've talked to a lot of partners that have said things like, well, we don't push back. There's like the extreme of we don't push back. And then there's the other end, which is like, we always push back. And I subscribe to the idea that you should put guardrails in place that allows the bigger partner, the gorilla in the room, if you will, Salesforce in this example, to drive down the street very comfortably, switch between lanes, get off exits, but there's guardrails. Like you have limits to how much you'll flex to service a customer, to bend and, kind of bend the knee in that sense. So how much of your then operating model is based off of guardrails versus strict operating structure to get to where you want to be while still aligning to what, in this case, Salesforce cares about?
Yeah, I love that analogy. And listen, at the end of the day, you're running your own business, so you have to have your own rules. But the approach we take is be open to have the conversation always.
I'm smart,
and see where it leads. And I think this comes back to having internal alignment with all the proper key stakeholders. So you're not making the call that's not yours to make. Like I often bring my CTO, my chief sales officer, my CMO on the call to be like, what do you guys think? Here's an opportunity. Could be big. But if it's not within the scope of where we're going as a company, we are absolutely fine saying no. And those are guardrails you have to have.
Yeah, you heard it here first, folks. I don't disagree in any way. In fact, I want to echo that and amplify it. I think it's really easy when you're naturally inclined to say, yes, how can we do that? Particularly in the beginning, when you're trying to build the trust that you're describing. But I think, again, those frameworks are super important. So that's great. Sam, this has been awesome. Thank you. Very insightful. We appreciate it. If folks want to follow up, they want to get in touch, they want to reach out, where do they find you on the internet? How do they do so?
LinkedIn probably be the best. Sam Yarborough. Would love to connect with you there.
Brilliant. We'll tag you in the comments. Folks, as always, thanks for listening to another episode of Outcomes. Like, subscribe, leave a comment. We appreciate you as always. Thank you so much for your feedback. Keep the DMs coming. We're really excited to continue to have great conversations with incredible people like Sam. And again, thank you so much for joining the show today. Sam, it's been a blast.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it, Barrett.